Manchester, and welcome to another edition of Girard at Large. I am your don't mind the stuffy nose and occasional cough host, Rich Girard. Thanks for tuning in. 'Tis the season, don't they say? As you know, I can still taste, I can still smell. Some people say I still smell. And I don't have a fever, so I know it's not COVID. You can still find us online at Girard113023.com, and you can find us on Facebook and Twitter. Also at Girard at Large, where we encourage you to like us and to follow us. Why? Because you got nothing better to do. All right, so I missed you last week because I was unable to be here Tuesday night. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. We were 14 at my house. That's kind of loading up my dining room. Anyway, and then we had some friends over Saturday night, and we were 14 again, so we must be gluttons for punishment. I think we gave the trash guys a hernia. Thank God we got the mechanical arm. Anyhow, chuckling off in the distance, there is Ward 6 Alderman Chrissy Cantor. We'll be talking to her tonight as the night goes on. Well, I have to tell you, there are things that, I'm starting to feel like I did back in 2015 when I decided I had to run for the school board because I got sick and tired of hearing myself complain about the lies that they tell and the misinformation that they peddle. When I had my radio show, and when it dawned on me that the only way that was going to change is if someone got onto the school board that was going to call them out on it, I decided to run. Fortunately for me, I'm starting to feel that now, and the next election is 2 years away. But who knows what can happen between now and then. But it's time that we pull the veil off this ugly bride, and actually there are a couple of them coming down the aisle at you. One is called a Phase 1 of some kind of facilities master plan that I think was developed on the island of Building Envy. And the other are a series of school district contracts that are a freight train coming for your wallet. So, where shall we start? Well, the first thing I have in my hot little hands here is something that it took 8 days for the Manchester School District to give me. 8 days. Now, as a former 4-year member, including 2 years as chair of the Finance Committee, and a 4-year member of the Buildings and Sites Committee of the school board, I can tell you without a doubt that the only reason why it took them 8 days to give me this information on Beach Street School was because it was 8 days, because that put it 1 day beyond the meeting of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, where this boondoggle bond of $300 million that will cost you $18 million a year for 25 years. You want to do some math on that? Hold on. I'm going to get the almighty calculator. $18 million times 25. Oh, there's $450 million of your tax dollars for a school we don't need. I'll come back to that. But it took 8 days for them to send it to me because it was day number 8 was the day after the Board of Mayor and Aldermen met to consider this boondoggle bond. And I know that Jen Gillis, superintendent of schools, knew that if I had this information, I would share it with the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. But of course, I didn't have the information, so all I could do was make a generic reference to the millions of dollars spent over the last 10 years on Beach Street School, which, if you've ever actually been there, you'd know is actually a pretty nice facility. And anyway, so let's talk about Beach Street School for a minute, because they want to blow it up and build a new one so that they can blow up Wilson School, which is the only school left in the city that has where the overwhelming number of kids are from the neighborhood directly and can walk there. Okay? So, in the last 10 years, the city of Manchester, and oh, by the way, I know they had this earlier than they gave it to me, because when Alderman Ed Sapienza of Ward 8 asked, how much money have you spent on Beach Street School in the last 3 years? Superintendent Jen Gillis was going through her paperwork. Oh, wait a minute, I have that. Just hold on. 1.8 million, she says. It was actually 2.2. So apparently the superintendent can't do math, but given the amount of money they're spending and how they're throwing around, is it anybody's surprise? So what have we spent at Beach Street School in the last 10 years? $6.2 million. $122,000 to replace a transformer. $1.5 million on ventilation improvements. $469,000 on a new roof. $38,000 on an alarm panel. $70,000 on elevator controls. $28,000 for exterior masonry repair and caulking. Almost $40,000 on a cafe storefront, and over $4 million to build walls. Build walls? Yes, build walls. Why would you need to build walls? Well, there were Beach Street Elementary, Highland Goffs Falls School in the south end, and Parker Varney on the west side. If you've ever been to those buildings, you'll go, these are pretty similar buildings. That's because they were all built at the same time, and they were all built pretty much according to the same floor plan. And when they were built, they were something called, Chrissy, open concept schools. Go ahead, ask.
What's an open concept school?
Oh, some wizard of smart somewhere decided that classrooms were bad, that walls separated kids. And, and so, yet it's like an open concept house. There's no wall between your living room, your kitchen, your family room, or whatever it is. Well, they did this in schools.
Okay.
And this was supposed to be an environment that children can learn. It's one of those fads of the 70s, right?
Yeah.
So children
I remember that.
Open concept school. That's right. You went to Beach Street.
I went to Beach Street in first grade, but went to Webster afterwards. But I was over in Memorial in Bedford, and that was open concept there.
Well, open concept didn't work. It was stupid, so we ended up building walls in all of those schools to turn them into traditional classrooms. And as a result, it was pretty much a brand new school. So let's talk about what happened at the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, because I testified. I'm the amazing invisible man. Andy Sylvia from the Manchester Ink Link.
He left you out?
He left. I even gave him a copy of my testimony, as I normally do. I sent it off to the union leader, the amazing invisible man. I guess, I don't know. I know Carol Robidoux, and she's kind of like an activist journalist, so I'm sure she's all for this. And Carol owns and operates the Manchester Ink Link. So I suppose any information that is not in line with the narrative that she supports, and I have firsthand experience with this as a former school board member. When there's an agenda, she's all about the agenda and not the facts.
Oh, I've experienced the agendas too.
Anyway, so but here's the reality, folks. In 2021, the school board commissioned a facility study, and the facility study said a bunch of things. First off, it said Wilson didn't need to close. It said it gave Wilson a fair rating there were 3 categories that they assessed the buildings on. It gave it a fair rating overall, and it recommended $3.5 million worth of upgrades. Now, I guess that sounds like a lot of money, but when you consider that all of the upgrades, maintenance, repairs, everything that they recommended, for, well, we'll take Hallsville out of the equation. Hallsville, they needed $5.2 million. But if you take Hallsville out and you take Central out, because Central was $17 million, but they said Central should be closed, and its population combined with West at West, and West would be renovated for $8.9 million. Okay? So if you take Central and Hallsville, you take that $22 million out, you could build... You could do everything that 2021 study said, all of the maintenance, all of the repairs, all of the upgrades, which included technology upgrades, included reconfiguration, everything, for about everything in the middle schools and in the elementary schools, for $30 million less than it's going to cost to build the new Beach Street School.
And how much is it costing? Is it $80
million.
$80 million.
79 to be exact, but we'll round it up because there's no way they're going to build it for $80 million. They also, so they didn't, they were pretty down on Hallsville. They said Hallsville should close, and Hallsville was closed. But they didn't say that about Wilson. They also said that our 4 middle schools, including moving the 5th grades into the middle schools, which has happened at Parkside and Southside, but not happened at Hillside and McLaughlin. They said that given the current number of vacant seats, coupled with the declining enrollment, which they were wrong about the declining enrollment. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, they said it's going to decrease by 15% by 2030. But you know why they're wrong?
Why?
Because we're already at the 2026 decrease number. So it's falling much faster. So for the Jim O'Connells of the world who said, oh, once COVID is over, everyone will flock back to the Manchester schools. Well, last I checked after COVID, the numbers still did this. Anyhow, so they said you don't need to actually do anything to the middle schools because there is sufficient space for them to handle the population and the task assigned to them. So you have, taxpayers of Manchester, a $300 million building program where $80 million is going to go to replace a school that you could renovate for $3.5 million, upgrade Beach Street for another 3.2, right? So you're at $7 million, give or take, just under $7 million to renovate, upgrade, and repair Beach Street and Wilson versus $80 million for a new school that will combine the two of them and put additions onto buildings that already have surplus space and continued declining enrollment. And it's only going to cost you $18 million a year or $450 million over the next 25 years. But don't worry, says the school district, you're not going to see an increase in your tax rate. $18 million. Now I want to put this $18 million in perspective. Chrissy, do you know how much money the Manchester School District today spends on debt service?
No.
It's $12 million.
Okay.
Of that $12 million, do you know how much we're still paying per year on the $100 million we borrowed 20 years ago to expand Central, West, and Memorial under Bob Baines?
Is it $7 million?
It's about 7.2.
Okay.
So more than half of what we're paying for in debt service today was to expand Central, West, and Memorial 20 years ago. And true story, at the time Bob Baines was talking about building these expansions, the demographic studies that were being produced at the time were showing a decrease in enrollment, not because any towns were leaving, but you know, they're smart people. They're called demographers, and they have a way of projecting population trends. And 20 years ago, they were projecting decreasing enrollment.
Interesting.
But the idea back 20 years ago was, well, you know, if we make this big investment in our buildings and we bring them up to modern day practices and make them all shiny and nice, you know,
they'll come.
The towns will be happy. Well, and more people will come.
And that didn't work.
And no, but it's going to work this time because we're going to spend 3 times as much money. Don't you know? If it didn't work the first time, you just spend more. Because obviously
that's just insanity.
But here's the rest of it. Okay, so you know Bob Baines, who supports this $300 million boondoggle, is almost indignant over how much hasn't been done since he did this 20 years ago. Well, when you're shucking $7.5 million in debt service on that one project, and you don't do anything else to do any maintenance or repairs or upgrades to the other schools, you limit the amount of money you can actually spend because you've taken up such a big chunk of your capacity to get into debt that you handcuff yourself in being able to do more projects moving forward. Okay? So we've got this $300 million project that will build an elementary school we don't need, put additions onto the 4 middle schools that are unnecessary because there's A, excess space, and B, declining enrollment. Mm-hmm. And you think that might be the end of the story, but no, there's more. And this is where we're going to get into what happened at the board the other night, because I could see that there were some people who they could sense that something was wrong, but you know, those school district officials, they're wily, and they choose their words very carefully. And I'm going to show everyone how they slipped it by the board, how they lied, and how we got to where we are. And then we're going to tackle contracts. Isn't that fun?
Sounds excellent.
So phase 2 of this is a $400 million high school at the site of the current Beach Street School. Now, how could I make such an audacious claim? First, let's take a look at where they want to build the new Beach Street School. It's not where the current Beach Street School is. We're not talking about expanding that building or putting an addition onto it. We're talking about building a brand new building on the park and playground land across Beach Street to the west side of Beach Street, Brand new. Okay. Remember, we have a building sitting there that just had $6.2 million put into it. 6.2. Roofs, ventilation system, just in the last 2 years.
Wow.
Okay. So the school board is looking at phase 2. Phase 1, $300 million on buildings building additions we don't need. Phase 2 is a high school. Now, one would think that if they were just, as they said at the meeting of the school, of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, one would think that if they were just conceptualizing what a building might look like and what a building might cost, because that's what they said when they were asked, right? One would think that there would just be sort of a generic site plan that they presented to say, well, this is what it could look like, and this is what it might cost, and this is the kind of site that we need to look for in order for this to happen. So these are the different types of sites that we might consider. That would be sort of a conceptual proposal, don't you think?
Yes.
Okay, but what they did was they actually presented 2 site plans for, drum roll please, Beach Street School, where it currently is. So both plans that they presented called for the demolition of the Beach Street School, which raises a number of questions like all of the money we've put into it. Taxpayers will continue to pay the bonds for the repairs that were done. And about $1.5 million of it, the ventilation, was done with those COVID funds back in 2022, ESSER funds. I'm not sure the federal government, I don't think the rules allow you to put them in, spend $1.5 million on a building and then a year later blow it up. Just saying. They might want to check the rules on that one. So, but while both plans removed the existing Beach Street School, this is why we have to build it on the other side, because we want to blow it up over here to make way for the high school. Remember, it's just a plan. We're thinking out loud. While both of them blew up Beach Street School, one of the plans blew up the JFK Arena. Okay, now they weren't going to get rid of it. I mean, they were going to get rid of JFK, but they were going to build a new ice arena elsewhere on the site. You see, because if they blew up Beach Street and they blew up JFK, then they could lay out the high school like this. And they had all these pretty pictures, and everyone, ooh. But if they didn't blow up JFK, plan number 2 was, we don't blow up JFK. What they did was they oriented the construction of the high school around the existing JFK arena. Now, folks, I may have fallen off the turnip truck a day or 2 ago, but the bump, I don't think, turned into a brain tumor. If you give me 2 plans for the same site, one that blows up both facilities and one that blows up one and builds around the other, I'm kind of thinking this is a little more than a conceptual plan. And as you know, they presented some of that to you at the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. And lo and behold, it was so compelling that Alderman Tony Sapienza of Ward 5 said, I'm never going to vote for a high school, but just to be safe, I'll move we approve the bond with the condition that they don't tear down JFK or Gill. And then Ed Sapienza is like, well, gee, how come didn't you present that? And Levasseur got in on it. And Mayor Craig says, oh, no, it wasn't a presentation. It was a proposal. And that's when the consultant said, oh, yes, it was just a concept about a high school on a site. Oh, that's a pretty specific concept, don't you see? So now, taxpayers, you're looking at $290 million, really $450, for 4 additions you don't need to middle schools that already have excess space, and a new school you don't need because you can renovate Beach and Wilson and take care of the facility flaws. Now you're looking at $400 million for a high school on that site. So what you have to understand is all this money, $300 million for phase 1, and $400 million, get this now, it's for the high school, but phase two, high school, $400 million. and all 11 other middle schools. I mean, all the remaining 11 elementary schools, but they don't have any numbers on that yet. They won't have any of that till March. Keep your shirt on. It's fine. So you start at $400 million with a high school, and given the way they're spending on the other schools, can you imagine what the other 11 elementary schools are going to cost?
I can't even imagine.
Now, folks, what you have to understand about a bond is this is debt. Okay? When they say it's going to be bonded, it means the city is going to borrow money. So we're looking at, in the city of Manchester, for these two phases, which aren't even complete, borrowing $700 million. The debt service on that will go up another $21 million, according to their own numbers. It's funny, if they don't have any cost, like Ed Sapienza of Ward 8 asked about the cost, right? Mm-hmm. He asked about the amount of money it was going to be spent. Oh, we don't have any costs yet. But yet, when they presented to the school board and they presented to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, they showed what's called a bonding schedule, how much money you're going to pay in principal and interest over the next 25 years on the amount of money that they borrowed to build this school. That was part of the presentation. If you don't know what it's going to cost, how in God's name are you going to come up with a bonding schedule? Don't believe your lying, don't believe my lying mouth with your lying eyes. This is, I'm making light of this because it is so absurd. It's making what left of my hair hurt.
It's insanity.
Okay, so now let's get back to this. It won't affect your taxes. Okay. At least phase one won't affect your taxes. Alderman Levasseur kind of drilled down on that.
And they promised.
Yeah, they promised. Pinky promise. Is it pinky promise or pinky swear? I don't know.
I think it's pinky. I don't know. Pinky promise.
Okay.
Pinky swear. Who knows?
Well, I have something to say about the New York State bird, but we'll leave it at that. So here's the way here's what they're trying to do, and this is going to tie into the contracts too. So as you may know, the state of New Hampshire, when it passed its last budget, which was after the city passed its budget, okay? That becomes an important thing here. So the state said, new education funding formula, Manchester, you're going to get $35 million more than we told you were going to get. Mm-hmm. So the city of Manchester budget includes the original amount of money from the state, not the $35 million. So the $35 million falls like manna from heaven. And, and then the school board goes to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and says, oh, please, will you appropriate this money for us? Because you can do that. Unexpected revenues, there can be what's called a supplemental appropriation. There's a process that has to go through. It has to be a public hearing and all this fun stuff. Everybody followed the process, and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen did one of these. No offense, but that's what the board did. They didn't ask any questions. They didn't say, so what are you going to use this $35 million for? Now, it's important for you, the taxpayer, to know that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen did not have to appropriate that $35 million. And if they didn't appropriate that $35 million come tax rate setting time, there would have been a 15% cut in the tax rate here in the city. It would have cut taxes by something like $2.65 per thousand. That's a pretty big tax cut. Mm-hmm. So when they say, oh, it's not going to cause the tax rate to go up, well, that's because they're going to spend all $35 million of it. If they had given any of it back to the taxpayer, $1 million, $5 million, 10, what the hell is $35 million bucks? You would have seen your taxes get cut. So it's important to note that the absence of a tax rate increase to fund this spending does not mean you aren't paying more in taxes than you could have been paying. There could have been a very big tax cut in the city. But Rich, that was all for schools. Well, true, except that the way you build a budget is you take a look at your sources of income. And when you get money like we do here in the city, which at this point, now with the $35 million, we got $100 million between the statewide property tax and aid to the schools. $100 million for the schools. I can take a look at that and say, well, what are the operational needs of the school budget? Oh, it's $200 million. Okay, so we'll take $100 million in aid. We'll take $100 million in taxes, $200 million for the school. Mm-hmm. Well, that which effectively would have reduced the amount of taxes that were raised for the budget by $35 million, right? So you could have had a big tax cut. So what the school board has done now is they say, oh, well, this project that we're lying to you about, both because we don't really need the additions, we don't need the new building, we could renovate West High School for $9 million, and if you wanted to keep Central, that's 17, right? I'm not saying one should close or one shouldn't, but it's funny, we hire these consultants, we hire the experts, and when they say something we don't like, we go hire other experts until we get the ones that we want. And that's exactly what's happening here. Not for nothing. You got to remember, Jen Gillis was first a middle school principal in this district. The middle school principals were a gang, really. They would come together to all of the board meetings and all of the committee meetings, and they hooked arms, and those are her peeps. And she, everything she's done, she's shown favoritism towards the middle schools, even as an assistant superintendent. And I could say that because I was on the board when she was there as an assistant superintendent. And so really it's about taking care of her friends is what this is about. But when it comes to these building projects, because clearly they don't need it. Southside is half empty now. What the hell are they going to do with an addition? Parkside is the closest you have to a school at capacity, and its numbers are falling just like everybody else's. Hillside and McLaughlin you could fire cannons through these places. But, the funny thing is, the more staff we hire, the fewer kids we have, the less room we have. We need to put in all these building additions. She said it at the school. We need to have these additions to lower our class sizes. Look, 1,700 kids have left the Manchester school district since Joyce Craig became mayor. She's done a great job lowering class sizes. She's chased them all out of the district because it's horrible. Anybody with any sense or any choices are not sending their kids to the Manchester school.
It's very sad.
Manchester school district. So the way they soak up this money is they say, oh, don't worry, we can absorb this $18 million. Oh, and by the way, what's $21 million? $21 million times 25 years is $525 million. So you are at $1 billion in debt payback for these two projects. $1 billion. None of which you need. I love the way didn't you love the way they were talking about, the new schools and how they added extra natural light and this, that, and the other. And I just had visions of children growing like plants. Oh, sunlight. Does it have a sprinkler system to water me too? Look, I sat on curriculum and instruction. There is, and they can say what they want. Okay, the only people who write books or studies that say, oh yes, new buildings are great for kids are the architects that want to build the damn things and make money. Mm-hmm. Okay, which is you think this consultant isn't going to be managing?
Well, it was $1.5 million for the architects.
Yeah, well, you don't think they're going to get a piece of the building action? They're going to have to GC the whole thing. That's general contract for those of you who are in the peanut gallery don't know that. The insiders speak. So, 18 million, half of that 35 million that fell from the sky is going to go to pay off those bonds. One project, one bond issue is going to have a debt service payback that's 50% higher than what we're paying now. That's nuts. And then the other one's going to more than double it. There's a year in the bonding schedule where just the principal and interest on this debt is $46 million. That's double the size of the police department budget in debt. That's crazy. You know how much road you could pave with that kind of money? You could pave the city in gold and rebuild every sidewalk with the same amount of money. The highway department budget isn't even $20 million. You're going to spend more than double the amount of money on buildings you don't need than you spend on either your highway department, your public works department now, your public works department, your fire department, or your police department. What you spend on public safety between police and fire alone is about equal to what they're talking about just in principal and interest on this debt. But don't worry, your taxes aren't going to go up. We're just going to increase spending by $35 million and hope the state of New Hampshire doesn't change the aid formula again. And it would all be fine with me if it was actually going to do a damn bit of good for the children. Mm-hmm. You know, one of the big lies about the Manchester School District is how crummy and crappy the buildings are. These buildings, hey, B, do you have any idea how old the building we're in is right now?
I think 18-something?
Yeah. Mid to late 1800s. The building I'm in it's a damn shame nobody told Dick Anagnost that he couldn't renovate this building for modern uses. Don't anybody anytime there's a school board meeting, make sure Dean Kamen or Arthur Sullivan, make sure those boys aren't watching. Because they got mill buildings that go back at least to the mid-1800s. And if somebody tells them that they can't renovate their buildings for modern day uses, they just might tear down what they're doing. I mean, the Army project is going to have to go find a shiny new building because it can't exist in an old building that's been renovated for a new purpose. Can it? Can it? Oh. Have any questions?
It's just insanity.
So, and this is, now here's the thing, and I'm very serious about this because there is a slight chance that you can stop this. But you're going to have to call Mayor-elect Rouet. You're going to have to call your alderman or your alderman-elect. The Board of Mayor and Aldermen has given all but the last step, the last approval necessary to approve this bond. The bond is in what's called layover status right now. It will come up at the meeting of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen on December 5th. Now, if I'm the incoming mayor or I'm an incoming alderman, and I know that the budgets that I am going to have to put together are going to have to accommodate this behemoth of a building plan that is not necessary, I might just come forward and say to the current Board of Mayor and Aldermen, out of respect for the voters who just chose a radically different Board of Mayor and Aldermen, that you lay this on the table and allow us to take a look at it and make our own determination about its need so that when we do the budget, we'll be working with a die we cast, not stuck with something you did. If I had been elected mayor, I would not have sat in the back of the room while that debate was going on and people like Rich Girard were coming forward with information. You'd say what you want about me. No one's ever said that I haven't done my homework, and no one's ever said that I haven't thought it through. You may disagree with my conclusions, but you can't disagree that I have done the work. And I can cite you page numbers, chapter and verse, everything in those two studies, the demographic study, the facility study from 2021, to back up everything that is being said here. It's in black and white. In fact, then Superintendent John Goldhart made several recommendations based on that study, some of which weren't obviously in line with the study, like he wanted to close West and renovate Central. That was a totally political decision. And we all know it. And by the way, my sources at the district tell me the fix is in to kill West and to turn Central into a bunch of different alternative educational type of things, but to keep the buildings there anyway. This is why we need a shiny new comprehensive high school. And at the school board meeting, Jen Gillis, when she was asked about, oh no, we're not saying West has to close at this time. You notice the wording. We're not saying at this time that West needs to close. Oh no, you're just going to wait until later to say it. Okay.
Well, they just also switch things too, because first they weren't tearing down Beach in August.
Well, no, they were going to build a school on the McLaughlin site, the McDonough site, and. But, you know, after they came back with these radical changes, they didn't bother to actually go back out to the public for its feedback.
So we need a public hearing.
I would think so, but the school board didn't do it. The school board didn't even follow its own rules. Ken Tassi, the Ward 6 school board member, gave what's called a notice of reconsideration, which should have prevented that bond issue from going to the Board of Aldermen for consideration, because under Rule 2.08 of the Board of School Committee, a notice of reconsideration goes on the next agenda. The item is not considered disposed of until the reconsideration motion is dealt with. So rather than send it to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for a vote, they should have kept it in the school board, in the school district, for the school board's next meeting, which would have been this past November 27th. They didn't do that. And so I believe it wasn't properly at the Board of Mayor and Aldermen in the first place, but the Board of Mayor and Aldermen didn't seem to care about the fact that the school board didn't follow its own rules and sent it despite the reconsideration notice. No, the fix isn't in there, folks. Hey, you know, forget the rules. The rules got in the way. So there's that. So there's $18 million that's about to go out the window, $18 million that would be given to schools, but would be also freeing of other resources for the city to do other things, including lower taxes. You know, once upon a time, $29 million fell out of the sky. Back in 1999, I was on the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and Ray Wazorek, who was then the mayor, said, oh, I always said if I had more money for schools, I'd spend it. And instead of cutting taxes at the time by $8.25, he cut them by $1.49. And he got promptly voted out at the next election by taxpayers that are madder than hell that he sold them out at the end to try to placate the school, you know, the more money crowd from the schools that was never going to vote for him, no matter how much money he spent. And Bob Baines was actually pretty clever about it. He said, well, geez, if I had known this was all that was needed to get more money for the schools, I would have run years ago. And it just made Ray look stupid, and he lost. And frankly, he probably should have. Not that Bob Baines was a panacea for the city. He was horrible. But, you know, all of a sudden money falls from the sky and you don't do what you always told people you were going to do. And that's what's happening here. Money's falling from the sky. We're going to spend it. Now you have contracts. I'm going to take a look at the teachers' contracts, folks. For those of you who may remember, I spent 2 years as chairman of the negotiation committee at the school board. I have a lot to say about these contracts. So the one thing that I noticed is in the teacher's contract, there was no cost of living adjustment. If you take a look at the principal's contract and say, well, we're going to give you 6% in year 1 and 4% in year 2 and 4% in year 3. Okay? Take a look at the other contracts. They have cost of living percentages by which the pay is going to go up. They didn't do that for the teachers. They also didn't separate out what are called step increases. When we used to do the contracts, there was a cost of living increase. There was the base salary, the cost of living increase, and then the step increases. So you could see where the money was going, and you could say, okay, this 3% cost of living increase is going to cost you X in year 1, X in year 2, X in year 3. No, they just categorized it all as salary increase. So I went into the contract. I could find no evidence of any cost of living increase. So, B, I had to get what are called, now you can't see that, but I want you to see it's a grid. This is called a salary schedule, okay? And those are my notes. See, that's my math at the bottom. So the salary schedule is what's known as the step scale. I had to physically go and calculate the pay raises, the cost of living increases, among other things. And that's important because people think, including teachers, hey, I'm going to get a 9% pay raise in year 1, and then I'm going to get 4.9 in year 2. I'm going to get 5.0 in year 3. No. If you're at the bottom of the scale, remember, this is all about the bottom of the scale, right? We need to attract young teachers to come here. I think Jim O'Connell said it was a shame that we were only paying incoming teachers $41,000 a year, which, by the way, is a lie, because you see this goes from left to right. So it's a lie that all new teachers get paid $41,000, though some do, because you have categories. You have 6 different pay categories. You have a bachelor's degree. You have bachelor's degree plus 30 credits towards your master. You have your master's degree. Then you have master's plus 30 credits towards your CAGS or CAGS degree. And then you have your doctorate degree. And with every move to the right of the scale, you get a pay raise. Every move towards the top of the scale, which is actually the bottom, you get a pay raise. So the lowest of the low is a first-year teacher with just a bachelor's degree. Those were the people making $41,000. Okay? Which, when you think about it, for 175 days of work, ain't too bad. Do the per diem on that, and Well, since most people work about 330 days, 340 days, you're almost double. And there are a lot of people who work all year round who make $41,000. I know they don't have a college degree, although some of us did. Anyway, didn't do. So digging into this, if you're one of those incoming teachers, the incoming pay goes up in the first year across the scale somewhere between 9.7 and 10.9%. Over the life of the contract, people in the first 2 or 3 levels will see about a 22% pay raise over 3 years. Now, if you're at the top of the scale, if you're the teachers who have been here for 15 years or more, you see a 7% pay raise in year number 1. So you teachers at the top of the scale, you get gypped. You thought you were getting 9, you're getting 7. And over the life of the contract, they get 13.6. Okay? And lest you think they're getting robbed, I just want you to know the top of the scale is going from, stand by, that's over here. The top of the scale is going from $74,000 to $84,000. That's just for the BA1. If you got a master's degree, which are, if I remember correctly, most of the teachers in Manchester, you're going from $79,000 to $90,000. Nice work if you can get it, huh? Mm-hmm. Now, the big numbers, though, are people in the middle of the scale, from roughly about step 4 to roughly about step 12, okay? Care to guess what they're getting for a pay raise?
No idea.
30%.
Who's this?
These are teachers, hundreds of them, who are somewhere between step 3 and 4 and step 12 and 13. So the heart, the very heart, not the crispy edges at the top and the bottom, but the very heart of the scale. These folks are getting 30% pay raises over the next 3 years. Nice work if you can get it. First year, they get 12%. Then they slow it down a little bit. You know, they're only going to get 9% each of the next 2 years. Now, pay is not the only issue with this contract. There are, shall we say, perks. The MEA president gets taken care of here. Instead of having to teach classes, though she'll be paid on her step scale, she gets to work at the district office doing important things like recertifying teachers, which is something that the administration should be doing, or, God forbid, teachers do their own recertification work. You know, I got to tell you, I hold several licenses in financial services. I have many investment licenses and insurance licenses, and I hold them not just in New Hampshire, but I have what are called reciprocals in multiple states. Do you know that I have to take my own time and spend my own money to do my own continuing education and to get my licenses renewed? I don't have an employer that does that for me. But don't you worry, we got the union president spelled out in the contract. You know why? You know why she got this job?
Why? Because
Brendan McCafferty hated her. She was always at war with him. McCafferty being the Hillside principal. He rained terror on her life like he's done in so many people's lives. And you can go look up Brendan McCafferty at Girard113023.com. I've done several in-depth investigative articles with people who have been on the receiving end. Much of it documented by email, shockingly. And so rather than deal with the problem at Hillside, they brought her into the district office. So this is her get out of jail free card. And it's kind of hypocritical here because, you know, one of the things that the MEA has consistently done over the years is they've gone and complained about all the money that's being spent on administrators instead of going to teachers in the classroom. But when this first came up in a contract, I went and I opposed it, and I said, well, yeah, isn't it funny? It's okay to do this if you're taking the MEA president and giving her a plum little job in the district office. But don't you worry. The assignment will be reevaluated prior to the 25-26 school year to determine if the arrangement should still continue and is still meeting the party's intended objectives. My guess is she's retiring in 25-26. We have a new parental leave we now have paid parental leave in the Manchester School District.
Really?
Yes, really. But nobody's talking about that. The teachers don't have to use their sick time anymore. Huh. That's a pretty plum pickup, don't you know? Oh, this is my favorite. The parties acknowledge that the students of the district benefit from having the classroom educator present for each school day. Excessive educator absences, which they denied existed when I was chairing the negotiation. Well, publicly they denied it existed. Privately they admitted it. So that people like Maxine Mosley, who was then vice president of the union. Do you know what happened to Maxine?
No.
Oh, well, I was shopping one Friday morning at BJ's while I was having tires put on my car. Mm-hmm. And you'll never guess who I saw shopping at 10 o'clock in the morning.
On a work day?
On a work day. Maxine Mosley. So I called Superintendent Goldhart and I said, school in today? He's like, yeah, why? I said, because Maxine Mosley's here at BJ shopping. Well, that's not supposed to happen. And, well, after I got off the phone, I'm like, I better take a picture to document this. Now, Maxine, it's like somebody flicked a switch and she disappeared. I went looking for her, but I guess she got called in. But see, this is important because one of the things that Manchester has a real problem with is teacher absenteeism. And I remember when I was on the board, I was like, whoa, we have a substitute crisis. When you're trying to cover 12,000 teacher absences every school year, you don't have a substitute problem. You have an absenteeism problem. Mm-hmm. No district can cover. So at the time, I don't know how the numbers have changed, but at the time, about 55% to 60% of Manchester's teachers were considered chronically absent by the federal department, the standards, the guidelines of the Federal Department of Education. These are not teachers who, are out on Family Medical Leave Act. These are teachers who miss at least 10 days of school on our 175 school year due to sickness. When we dug into those numbers, you'd be horrified by those numbers. It's one of the reasons why we got away from using sick bank. It's one of the reasons why we wanted to have a paid time off scenario where unused days got bought back. So when you can carry 120 days in your bank, but when you retire you can only cash in 90 of them, that 30 days between what you have and what you can take is called a moral hazard. Those were the days that were being burned. It was senior staff mostly that were burning these days off because they felt they were owed it. Mm-hmm. And so we had this horrible, schools like West, 2/3 of the teachers at West, I think similar numbers at Parkside, were chronically absent. Well, hell, that's great. So now, the administration and the association are jointly going to communicate the need for teachers to be in the classroom. And if there's a reduction of 5% in the routine sick leave compared to the same period, then they're going to keep sending out that important message. But if not, the school district has the right to take disciplinary action against teachers it suspects are abusing. The problem with this language is, aside from the fact that it's totally feckless, is that all they did, Chrissy, you can see that, right? Mm. They struck out the years from the prior contract and just put in the years from the new contract, which means they didn't do it in the prior years. But don't you worry, you're going to get 4 extra work days out of your teachers, except those are going to be what are called professional development or workshop days, which means there will be 4 more days over the course of the school year where you're going to have to find childcare or not go to work because your children will be home. Because one thing we know about teachers and their workshop days is school is closed when they happen. So, and believe me, the only heavy lifting the teachers are going to be doing on those workshop days, if my experience with it in the past is instructive, is they're going to, lifting the coffee pot and the donut box while they're sitting there in their classrooms or wherever it is they're going to be sitting, allegedly being instructed with this valuable professional development. So that's just the teacher's contract. And for that, Manchester, you are going to pay, let me see, $8.7 million in the next school year, followed by another 5.3, another 5.8, for a total of $19.8 million over the next 3 years. But don't you worry, Alderman. You can vote for this. You know why? Because the school district, with that $35 million, took a look at it and they said, we think we should, their words to the school board, Matt Upton, the attorney, who I know all too well from my time on the board, all I'm going to say is, well, we were looking at hiring another attorney. He was a little too eager to make deals for us, but, or for our taste. But he said, we reserved $13 million of the additional adequacy aid to fund these contracts. So once again, miraculously, we can spend millions of dollars more than what would be allowed to be raised under the tax cap. Every single one of these contracts for the school district, every single one of them exceeds the tax cap. Every single one of them. Without question. And not by a little, by a lot. They think they get around that by saying, oh, we got $35 billion fall for it. We're going to reserve $13 million of this adequacy aid, and we are going to put it towards contracts. And then they did one of these, spraining my elbow, patting myself on the back because we only spent $11 million. But wait, there's more. Leslie Want, Jim O'Connell, acting like, I didn't know you were only going to pay the paraprofessionals $17 an hour or whatever it was. I didn't know you were only going to raise their pay by 12%. We need to do more. Oh, we have an extra $2 million. Maybe at budget time we can work it in. And they've done this before. It's totally illegal. They say, oh, well, we approved it in the budget. Therefore, we actually renegotiated the contract. It doesn't work that way, at least if you play by the rules. So now you have these school board members, Peter Argyropoulos, the at-large member, at least he showed he had a brain in his head and a little bit of a spine. He said, wait a minute, what are we doing here? We're approving a contract and then we're saying we're going to add more money to it later? That didn't make any sense. He was the only guy who stood up and said, this is crazy. No. So the massive increase, you could go to McDonald's and Hooks-It and make $20 an hour. If that's what they want to do, go. Because they don't get believe me, there are a lot of perks for the paraprofessionals. That was a contract, and they did it right. Of all the groups that I negotiated with, they were the only ones who really, I think, came to the table in good faith, that really tried to, work with us to resolve the problems. So I don't begrudge them anything, but, they went into, this is the same group, they went into this group's contract, following it was settled, saying, this is a disgrace. We need to pay them $15 an hour. And if we do that, so they lifted the base pay to $15 an hour. They gave everybody else a big pay raise on top of that. And they said, this is going to help us attract more paraprofessionals. Of the 92 vacancies that they had, do you know how many they filled after they jacked up the pay? Take a guess.
3?
8.
Ooh.
8.
8 out of 91.
Yeah, 92.
92.
Yeah, 8. The reason why people don't want to be paraprofessionals isn't the pay. It's the rules that they now have to operate under, because the way the laws are and the way the policies are, it's almost impossible to do the job and be safe or be effective. Mm-hmm. Oh, and when the school board has the opportunity to hire somebody like Patrice Bernard, who was a volunteer and doing the work of a para anyway, they decide that because she's affiliated with me and otherwise has been very outspoken at school board meetings about their waste and their lack of focus on things that matter, that, we can't let her in the schools, and they refused to hire her. They're lucky that she didn't sue.
Really?
They're lucky she didn't sue. She was this close to doing it, but she has some stuff going on in her personal life, and she just couldn't do it. Okay? But, so, now, we've spent 11 and 18 is $29 million, which means the schools theoretically have $6 million left. $6 million left of that adequacy aid that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen said, okay, here you go. Huh. The problem is they've got about $18 million worth of operating expenses that they pushed from their operating budget into the COVID funds, which expire at the end of this year. So for all of the money that they're saying they're going to use without raising your taxes, how much you want to bet that the $35 million isn't going to be enough? They pushed $10 million worth of special ed and transportation costs over. They misappropriated $3 million as a revenue so they could pump up the amount of money they were putting into their health insurance. And they've got 62 positions funded by the COVID money.
What are those positions?
They're all teachers.
62?
Yeah.
With COVID?
Yeah. Bill, you're on the air. Thanks for calling in.
Hello?
Bill, you're on the air. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, Rich, thanks for taking my call. How are you?
Unbelievable. How are you?
Oh, unbelievable, I hope.
We got to do for you. We're running out of time.
All right, thank you for all your input on the contracts and all your numbers. And I know you're a certified financial guy, so you have some letters behind your numbers, so to speak.
Well, that and I used to be the budget director, so I know it all. I know it all pretty well.
There you go. I'm hoping Alderman Cantor can listen to the other side, and I'll give you the other side real quick because I know you're running out of time. As a financial guy, if you're adding a large percentage to a small base, it's really not that much money. But here nor there, the bottom line is what are they getting paid at the end?
Mm-hmm.
And if they're getting paid so much, I'm going to use your logic now, which I'm almost embarrassed to say, but I'll use your logic. If they're getting paid so much for doing so little, why don't you become a teacher or become a para? So, God bless you, and I'm on the other side, but we can still agree to disagree.
Phil, I appreciate the call, Phil. And the truth of the matter is I looked at being a teacher because my dad was a lifelong educator. But, the one thing that I couldn't stand, I had to stop because I used to substitute at Southside. I had to stop going to the teacher's caf during lunch and breaks and things like that because they were very negative, and all they did was talk about what a bunch of dumb mill workers lived in this city, how it didn't value education, and over. There were a couple of them in particular that were just brutal, and I couldn't stand it. I said, if this is what teachers are like when people aren't looking, I can't do it. And it's not that they're not doing the work. And Phil, it's not so much the numbers, it's the deception embedded in the numbers. I'm not picking on the teachers. I'm not really picking on the pay raises. I am picking on the absenteeism because that's a huge problem. But the fact of the matter is this is all being presented in a very deceptive, dishonest way. And that is my bone of contention. And, listen, if you want to have a full-on discussion, who in the hell comes up with a contract where they don't have a cost of living number? Okay, I can tell you the cost of living number is about 3% just by doing the math, but I had to do the math, and then you add the steps, and that's where you get all of these big increases. Why not just spell it out? Why not just put it in the contract? And it's not going to affect the tax rate. Like hell, it's not going to affect the tax rate. It's going to soak up $35 million between these two projects that otherwise could really go to the taxpayer. And oh my God, then the city would still have to live within the tax cap. Maybe then it would be looking at renovating buildings for $30 million less than it's going to cost just to build a brand new one that you don't need. And you start making smart financial decisions that live within your means. This is going to be something that comes back to haunt the city on a massive scale. And that is the point. It's the deception in presentation. And I am over time. I am your ever humble host, Rich Girard. Thanks for tuning in. Until next week, Alderman, I got on a tear.
It's all good. It's all good.
So
we need to just put it all on the table. We sort it out and agree to disagree, but respect and love.
I'll have you back so we can talk about what you asked to talk about tonight. I apologize, but
it's all good.
Until next week, be good, be well. Don't do anything we wouldn't do. We're proud to have the audience. Thanks so much for being there. Good night.